Well, hey there. I'm Doug Meadows. I'm the founder and visionary and hero maker here at David Douglas Diamonds. And we are on a journey of what we're calling a century of luxury and legacy. And this is week 4. And I'm just sharing some different stories of our legacy. You know, where we came from and then where we are today. This week, I wanted to focus in on the Michigan Building or the Michigan Theater, depending on, I always just call it the Michigan Theater Building. You know, as I began to continue to learn just a little more about the building and the timing and looking at the time frame of my grandfather, because my grandfather, you know, when he started in 1926, he was down the street at the Metropolitan Building. It had just opened up in, I think, 1925, and he was a tenant in 1926. But he was only there for a short period of time. I'm not sure of the date that he actually moved on over there, but just as he moves in, the Michigan Building down the street, it was about less than a 10-minute walk from where he was at to the Michigan Theater Building. They had been building that in 1925 and opened it up in 1926. And, you know, I don't know. I think we're all attracted to new and shiny things, but I think my grandfather saw something different in that Michigan Theater Building. I can only guess, but that theater that they put there, well, first of all, the grounds that they built that on was the original grounds that Henry Ford had built his first quadricycle. He had his little workshop there and built that out and took his wife for a ride, different things like that. That current building, they have reconstructed that in a place called Greenfield Village. If you're ever up in Dearborn, Michigan, you've got to go to the Henry Ford Museum and Greenfield Village. They are both extremely interesting and just a lot of fun. But, you know, so this theater that they had built was a renowned theater for many, many years. It could hold, how many could it hold? It could hold a little over 4,000 seats were inside of it. And it had 2,500 pipe Wurlitzer organ in there that was on a platform that they could lift up and down as needed. Because back then, when they first opened up in 26, and they're showing movies, they were silent movies, so they had to add the music to it. The talking movies didn't come out until 1928. But when the theater first opened, it opened up with 5 shows daily, starting at 10:30 every morning. And the usual shows consisted of a concert by an orchestra, 2 20-minute stage shows, singers and dancers, and then a film. And the policy had a policy of that any seat in the theater for the same price, and prices range from 35 cents to 75 cents according to the time of day. But I mean, they had renowned acts coming through there. They had the Marx Brothers coming through, Frank Sinatra, Jack Benny, Louis Armstrong, Red Skelton, Glenn Miller, Benny Goodman, Doris Day, the Dorsey Brothers, Betty Davis. They all appeared on that Michigan Theater stage. There was one funny story that they told about Bob Hope. Bob Hope was showed there, and he thought he was headlining. And he goes out onto the street to look at the marquee to see his name, and lo and behold, he was replaced he wasn't really replaced, but he was second fiddle to a guy named Joe Mendy, which, you know, he didn't know who Joe Mendy is. Well, Joe Mendy in Detroit was the most famous chimpanzee that was around. And so Bob Hope had to take second fiddle to a chimpanzee in the Detroit, Michigan Theater Building. And But so you had the theater, and you had an office complex. The office building was 13 stories tall, and sadly, over the centuries or years or whatever, over the years, things change. Just in life, I mean, everything changes on us all the time. And, people didn't really care for going to that type of a theater. And then in today's standards, it became kind of small. I know that here in Atlanta, the fabulous Fox Theater downtown Atlanta has a little bit of has a little bit of a struggle doing different stage show productions because their stage is a little bit on the smaller side. But in the 70s, it kind of went in and out of popularity, closed down for seasons, and then different guys would come in and try to resurrect it, and it might last a year or two, and then it would fizzle out. And in the 70s, they turned it into the Michigan Palace, where they brought in rock bands and did rock concerts there. They had things like David Bowie and Kiss. They had, David Bowie, he was there for 7 nights in a row, and the tickets were like $10 or $12. And then they had like Aerosmith, they had Rush, Bob Seger, Blue Oyster Cult, Badfinger, Steve Winwood. I mean, all these different groups came through there and played. I had the opportunity one time to go down there at least twice, but the only one that I could really remember, for some reason, I really wanted to go see George Thorogood and the Destroyers, and he was actually the warm-up band for Bob Seger. And at the time, I didn't know who Bob Seger was. And so that's all I cared about, was going to see George Thorogood and the Destroyers. And I literally went to sleep during Bob Seger. But anyways, I could only think of my grandfather wondering, is this the new place to be? Is this, because, in business, location is important. I think they use that term, location, location, location. And I know that here at David Douglas Diamonds, our location is amazing. We just love it here. And, we're in between a Publix and a Crunch Fitness, and there's just, our parking lot is always full, and there's just a lot of people always coming through here. And so I'm very thankful that we are currently at this location. Although my dream someday is to have a freestanding building, but I can't beat this location for right now. But, so my grandfather, for whatever reason, decided to move to the Michigan building. He was up on the 10th floor. And, there are so many fun stories or fun experiences or memories that I have going down to the Michigan building when I was a little kid. My grandfather had already sold the business to my dad and uncle and had moved down to Florida. And, something about jewelry stores or jewelry manufacturers back in the day, back in the, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. Even recently I walked into a jewelry store and this aroma hit me. And this aroma is what we call Rouge. And Rouge is, when we polish up jewelry, we use this red stuff, and it's called Rouge. And it's our final polish step a lot of times on a piece of jewelry. And it puts a really nice, high, pretty luster on the jewelry. But, when you are using a polishing machine, you got this wheel spinning, you're charging it with this red compound, and it creates a mist or a dust. And you try to filter it through a vacuum system on the system, but it never catches it all. And so, in a polishing room, the walls are a little bit on the darker side with this residue of Rouge, and it has an unusual aroma to it. And so, once you've grown up in it, you can just walk into a building and you can just you know, if you smell that, you go, oh man, there's a jeweler in here somewhere. But, you know, when I was a kid, we would bug my dad to death to take us to work with him. Because, I mean, that Michigan building was like a playground. And back then, I mean, my dad just let us go roaming. I mean, you know, we could go roaming on the streets. We could go roaming up and down the elevator and different things. And, you know, it was kind of felt safe back then. You know, it's funny. You would get there and you'd have to go up on the elevator. And back then they had the elevator operator guy sitting on the little stool in there, and you get in there and you go, what floor? He'd close the gates and close the door and then take you on up to there. And but the 10th floor that my dad and uncle were on, there was quite a few other jewelers on that floor. And there was more jewelers, I think, on the 4th floor, at least when I was kind of doing some business down there. But you know, when those doors would open up on that 10th floor, you would be hit with the aroma of Rouge, the aroma of cigar smoke, and then the aroma of whiskey. Sadly, jewelers have a bad reputation, but you know, it was just a lot of fun. At the time, it was my dad and uncle's. My dad and uncle's shop was down at the end of the hall on the 10th floor, and you could look out the window and you could see the Ambassador Bridge going across the Detroit River. And one of our favorite things was to bug them to death for a penny. And they had a rolling mill, and we could take that penny and roll it through the rolling mill, and we could get that penny about that long. Be paper thin, and it could slice your finger wide open if you weren't careful with it. But we just thought that was the coolest little trick, was to take some money and you know, stretch your money. You know, going back to like Henry Ford and different things, and the quadricycle and doing the different things that he did, one of the things that came to my mind was an old story about the buggy whip, because, you know, in the early 1900s, as the horse and buggy was being challenged by and replaced by automobiles, you had over 1,300 buggy whip makers. They made buggy whips, and they just thought this fancy car was going to be a fad or wasn't going to stick or anything like that. And so 1,200 of them just kept doing what they were doing. But 100 of them saw an opportunity. You know, with change comes opportunity. And in business, we have that all the time. You know, in business, every time something changes on us, there's a new opportunity. And so the 100 that were creative and excited about this new opportunity began to partner with the auto industry, and they started making leather steering wheel covers, leather seats, leather dashboards. You know, anything they could make out of leather, they were on it. And so, I mean, one of the things they realized is they weren't in the buggy whip business, they were in the leather goods business. And, you know, it was a changing time, and they just needed to change with it. And so, you know, I'm sure my grandfather went through many changes in his time. And thankfully, if he hadn't changed, we wouldn't be here today. Whatever those changes might have had to be along the way, which we will probably discover some of those struggles and challenges as we move forward into the 30s and in the 40s and into the 50s. But, you know, but that's all I got for this week, and I look forward to talking to you next week. We'll see you. Bye.